The text came through at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. I was sitting in my recliner in my Phoenix living room, still in my bathrobe, reading the Arizona Republic with my second cup of coffee going cold on the side table. The mesquite tree outside my window was just catching the early light, and I was thinking about nothing in particular except maybe whether I should trim it back before summer hit. Then my phone buzzed. My grandson, Tyler. The message was only 9 words, but they stopped everything. Grandpa, don't sign anything. I found something bad. My hand actually shook a little as I set down my coffee cup. Tyler wasn't dramatic. The kid had just graduated from Arizona State with a degree in cybersecurity, worked part-time at some tech firm, spent most of his time buried in computer code I couldn't begin to understand. He was quiet, thoughtful, the kind of young man who thought before he spoke. So when he sent a text like that at 6:45 in the morning, I knew something was seriously wrong. I typed back with my old man thumbs, still hunting and pecking after all these years. What's going on? Are you okay? The 3 dots appeared immediately. He was typing, then they stopped, then started again. Finally, his message came through. It's about Diane. Can we meet today? I need to show you something. It's important, really important. Diane. My stomach dropped. I want to back up here and explain how I got to this point, because I know what you're thinking. 63-year-old widower, young girlfriend, probably getting scammed, and you wouldn't be entirely wrong to think it, but it wasn't quite that simple. My wife Margaret died 26 months before that Tuesday morning. Pancreatic cancer, 6 weeks from diagnosis to funeral. We'd been married 41 years. She was my high school sweetheart, the only woman I'd ever loved, the mother of our daughter Emily, the grandmother Tyler adored. When she died, she took half of me with her, maybe more than half. For 2 years, I didn't even think about dating. I didn't think about much of anything, except getting through each day. I'd retired from my job at Liberty Insurance 3 months before Margaret's diagnosis, and we'd planned to travel, to finally use that ranch property we'd bought up near Prescott to enjoy our grandkids. Instead, I found myself alone in a house that felt too big, with too much time and too many memories. Emily, my daughter, lived in Seattle with her husband and their 2 kids. She called every week, worried about me. Tyler was different. He'd stayed in Phoenix after graduating, got a place with some roommates in Tempe, but he came by every Sunday, brought me lunch, usually Whataburger because he knew I loved it. We'd sit and watch whatever football game was on, and he'd tell me about his work, and I'd pretend to understand terms like penetration testing and network security protocols. It was Tyler who first suggested, gently, that maybe I should try to meet people. Not to replace Grandma, he'd said carefully. Nobody could do that. But just, to have someone to talk to, do things with. I brushed him off at first, but the loneliness was crushing. The house echoed. I'd find myself talking to Margaret's photo on the mantel, which I knew wasn't healthy. So finally, on a whim, I joined one of those dating sites for seniors. Silver Connections or something like that. I met Diane Foster 3 months before Tyler's warning text. Her profile said she was 54, a business consultant, divorced, lived in Scottsdale. Her photos showed an attractive woman with shoulder-length brown hair, a warm smile, kind eyes. Her profile mentioned loving hiking, classic movies, and good conversation. She seemed normal, safe. We met for coffee at a Starbucks on Camelback Road. I was nervous as a teenager, but Diane made it easy. She was charming, asked questions about my life, laughed at my bad jokes. She told me about her work helping small businesses with their operations, about her grown son who lived in California, about how hard it was to meet genuine people at our age. We started seeing each other regularly. Dinners, movies, drives up to Sedona. She never pushed for anything physical, which I appreciated. She seemed to understand that I was still grieving, still finding my footing. After about 6 weeks, I introduced her to Tyler over dinner at my house. I remember that evening clearly now, though I didn't pay enough attention to it at the time. Tyler was polite but quiet. He asked Diane questions about her work, her background. She answered smoothly, confidently, but after she left, Tyler had said something that I dismissed too easily. "She seems nice, Grandpa. but I don't know. Something feels off. Off how? I'd asked. He'd shrugged, looking uncomfortable. I can't put my finger on it. Just some of her answers were kind of vague. And she name-dropped a lot. I don't know. Maybe I'm being paranoid. I'd laughed it off. You've been in cybersecurity too long, buddy. You think everyone's a hacker. She's just a normal woman trying to impress on a first meeting. He'd nodded, but I could see he wasn't convinced. Still, he didn't push it. Tyler respected that I was trying to move forward with my life. Over the next 2 months, Diane and I grew closer. She started staying over some nights. In the guest room at first, then eventually in my room. She talked about the future, about maybe moving in together, about traveling to all the places Margaret and I had planned to visit. It felt good to have someone care about me again, to have someone to share meals with, to not eat dinner alone in front of the TV every night. Then things started moving faster. Diane mentioned that her lease in Scottsdale was ending, that rent was getting ridiculous, that maybe it made sense for her to move into my house. She brought up the idea of combining our finances, said it would be easier, more efficient. She'd even found a financial advisor who could help us plan our retirement together. And that's when she mentioned the ranch property. You know, she'd said one evening over wine on my back patio, that land you have up near Prescott could be worth quite a bit. Have you thought about selling it? We could use that money to really do something special. Buy an RV, see the country. I'd told her I'd think about it. The ranch was 40 acres my dad had bought back in the 70s, land Margaret and I had held on to with the idea of maybe building a cabin someday. It wasn't worth a fortune, but it was worth something. Maybe 300,000 or 400,000 in today's market. What Diane didn't know, because I hadn't told her yet, was that I also had Margaret's life insurance money, $800,000, sitting in an account I hadn't touched because I couldn't bear to spend money that only existed because she was gone. Plus my retirement savings, my pension, the equity in my house. I wasn't wealthy, but I was comfortable, very comfortable. I'd been planning to tell Diane about the full scope of my finances soon. We'd been talking about making things official, maybe even getting married. At 63, I figured life was too short to waste time. If I'd found someone I could be happy with, why wait? But I hadn't told her yet. And now, staring at Tyler's warning text, I felt ice water in my veins. I texted back, "Where do you want to meet?" "The Desert Botanical Garden. 10 a.m. by the Butterfly Pavilion? I'll be there." I showed up 15 minutes early, bought my admission ticket, and found a bench near the Butterfly Pavilion. The garden was beautiful, as always. Margaret and I used to have a membership. I watched tourists taking photos of the saguaros, families with young kids running down the paths. A mockingbird was singing aggressively at another bird in a Palo Verde tree. Tyler arrived exactly at 10. He was wearing jeans and an ASU t-shirt, carrying a backpack that looked heavy. His face was serious, older somehow than it had looked just 2 weeks ago at our last Sunday lunch. "Hey, Grandpa," he said, sitting down next to me. "Hey, kiddo, you want to tell me what this is about?" He took a deep breath. "I need you to listen to everything I'm going to tell you before you react, okay? Because I know this is going to sound crazy, and I know you're going to want to defend her. But I need you to hear me out." My heart was pounding. Okay, Diane Foster isn't who she says she is. I opened my mouth, but he held up a hand. "Please, just listen." He unzipped his backpack and pulled out a laptop. 3 weeks ago, after you mentioned that she wanted to move in and combine finances, I got worried. Not because I don't want you to be happy, but because everything was moving so fast. So I did what I do professionally. I ran a background check. Tyler, you can't just... I can, actually. It's public information, mostly. And Grandpa, there's no Diane Foster, matching her description in Scottsdale. No business license for a consulting company. No property records. No business registration. Nothing. He opened his laptop and turned it toward me. Her name isn't Diane Foster. It's Diane Kovach. And she's not from Arizona. On the screen was a driver's license photo from Nevada. The woman was unmistakably Diane, but younger, maybe 10 years ago. The name read Diane Marie Kovach. "She's from Las Vegas originally," Tyler continued. "And she has a criminal record. He clicked through to another screen. A mugshot, again, clearly Diane, from 2019. She was arrested for fraud in Clark County, Nevada. She scammed a widower out of $75,000 by convincing him to invest in a fake business venture. The charges were eventually dropped because the victim died before trial. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. It gets worse, Tyler said quietly. He pulled up another document. This one a police report from Albuquerque, New Mexico, dated 2021. 2 years ago, she was involved in another case. Different name that time, Diana Foster. She'd been dating a retired engineer, convinced him to put her on his bank accounts as a joint holder for estate planning purposes. Within 3 months, she'd drained $42,000. He reported her to police, but she'd moved on before they could arrest her. There's an active warrant in New Mexico. My hands were shaking. How did you find all this? Facial recognition software crossed with public records databases. It's not legal for law enforcement to use without a warrant, but civilians can access some of this stuff if you know where to look. Once I had her real name, the rest was just following the trail. He showed me more documents. A bankruptcy filing in California from 2016. A small claims court judgment in Texas from 2018. A restraining order from Colorado. She's been doing this for at least 8 years, Tyler said. Different states, different names, always targeting older men who've recently lost their wives. She finds them on dating sites, builds a relationship, gains their trust, then gets access to their money. Sometimes she disappears after a few months. Sometimes she stays longer if the target has more assets. I couldn't breathe. The ranch property, my insurance money. She knows about all of it? Have you told her about the insurance money? Not yet, but I was going to. Tyler's face was grim. Grandpa, I found something else, something that really scared me. He pulled up an article from a Las Vegas newspaper, dated 2017. Remember how I said that widower in Nevada died before her trial? I nodded, unable to speak. He died of an apparent heart attack. 68 years old, no previous heart problems. Died 3 days after changing his will to make her the primary beneficiary. Tyler looked at me with frightened eyes. The family requested an autopsy, but the body was cremated before it could be performed. Diane claimed it was what he wanted, said he'd told her. There was no will specifying cremation. The implications hit me like a freight train. You think she killed him? I think it's possible. I think at minimum, she's dangerous. And I think she's planning to take everything you have, one way or another. I sat there in the desert sunshine, surrounded by the beauty of the botanical garden, my world crumbling. Everything about the past 3 months ran through my mind in a different light. How she'd always been vague about her work details. How she'd discouraged me from looking her up online, said she valued privacy. How she'd suggested I update my will, said it was responsible given our relationship. How she'd been pushing to be added to my bank accounts. Where is she now? I asked. She thinks you're playing golf today, right? I nodded. I'd told her I had an early tea time with some guys from my old insurance office. Good, because we need to figure out what to do next, and we need to do it without tipping her off. We spent the next 3 hours in that botanical garden, making a plan. Tyler walked me through every piece of evidence he'd gathered. He'd even found social media accounts where Diane, under different names, was active in online communities for people who'd lost spouses, scouting for potential marks. We need to go to the police, I said. We will. But I want to get more first. Right now, we have evidence she's using a false name and has a history of fraud, but nothing directly connecting her to planning to defraud you. If we move too soon, she could disappear, like she's done before. What do you suggest? Tyler hesitated. I want to record her, get her to admit what she's doing. My friend Dave, he works in law enforcement tech. He can get us a wire, something small you can wear. If we can get her on recording admitting her real identity, her plans, that would be solid evidence. How do I get her to admit it? Confront her. Tell her you know. She'll either run or she'll try to talk her way out of it. Either way, we'll have it on tape. It was risky, but the thought of this woman, who'd held me while I cried about Margaret, who'd made love to me, who'd talked about our future together, the thought of her being a predator hunting me, made me sick with rage. Okay, I said. Let's do it. 2 days later, I was wearing a small recording device taped to my chest under my shirt. Tyler was parked outside my house in his Honda Civic, listening on headphones, ready to call 911 if things went wrong. Diane came over for dinner, like we'd planned. I'd cooked pasta, opened wine. We sat on my back patio as the sun set over the desert, painting the sky orange and purple. "You seem distracted tonight," she said, touching my hand. "Everything okay?" This was it. "I need to ask you something, Diane, and I need you to be honest with me." She smiled, but I saw wariness in her eyes. "Of course. What's on your mind? Is your name really Diane Foster?" The smile froze. "What kind of question is that?" "A simple one. Is Diane Foster your real name?" She pulled her hand back. "Where is this coming from? Did someone say something to you? Just answer the question." She stood up, her chair scraping on the patio stones. "I don't appreciate being interrogated. If you're having some kind of crisis of trust—" "Diane Kovach," I said, standing to face her. "Las Vegas, Nevada. Arrested for fraud in 2019. Should I go on?" Her face went white, then red. For a moment, I thought she might bolt. But then something shifted in her expression. The warmth, the kindness, all of it dropped away like a mask. What was left was cold calculation. "Who told you?" she asked quietly. "Does it matter?" She laughed, but it wasn't a pleasant sound. "Your grandson has to be. I knew that kid was trouble from the first time I met him. Too smart, asking too many questions." She shook her head. "I should have moved faster." "Moved faster to what? Steal my money? Or were you planning something more permanent, like what happened to Harold Newsom in Nevada?" Her eyes narrowed. "Harold had a heart attack. Tragic, but these things happen at that age. You should be careful, Robert. Stress is terrible for the heart." Was that a threat? My own heart was pounding so hard I thought she might hear it, might realize I was wearing a wire. "I want you to leave," I said. "Now, and I never want to see you again." She studied me for a long moment. Then she smiled, and it was the coldest thing I'd ever seen. "You have no idea what you're giving up. We could have been good together. I would have made your last years comfortable." "My last years?" "However many you have left." She picked up her purse from the patio table. "You're making a mistake. That ranch property, your insurance money, your retirement accounts, I know exactly how much you're worth, Robert, down to the penny. And you're going to die alone anyway, probably sooner rather than later. Why not spend it on someone who could appreciate it? Someone like you, someone like me." She moved toward the patio door. "I'll get my things from inside." "No need. I already packed them." I pointed to a suitcase I'd left by the door earlier. "Everything you left here is in there." Her face twisted with anger. "You presumptuous old fool. You think you're clever? You think your little computer nerd grandson is going to save you?" She grabbed the suitcase. "I've been doing this for a long time. I know how to disappear. By tomorrow, I'll be in a different state with a different name, and there's not a damn thing you can do about it. There's a warrant for your arrest in New Mexico, which they'll never serve because they'll never find me." She opened the patio door. "Enjoy your empty house, Robert. Enjoy eating dinner alone, sleeping alone, dying alone. You had a chance at happiness, and you threw it away." She walked through my house and out the front door. I heard her car start, heard her tires screech as she pulled away. I stood there, shaking, barely able to breathe. Tyler burst through the back gate 30 seconds later. "Did you get it?" he asked. I nodded, pulling my shirt open to show the recording device. Every word. He was already on his phone, calling the police. The next few hours were a blur. Police came to my house, took my statement, took the recording device. An officer told me they'd put out a bolo, be on the lookout, for Diane's car and description. They'd contact Nevada and New Mexico authorities about the warrants. They'd flag her known aliases in the system. "She's done this before," the detective told me. "A tired-looking woman named Rodriguez. We see it more than you'd think. Con artists targeting seniors, especially widows and widowers. You're lucky your grandson caught it when he did." Tyler stayed with me that night. We ordered pizza, sat in my living room, tried to process everything. "I should have seen it," I said. "I should have known. Grandpa, these people are professionals. They're good at what they do. That's why it works. I was so lonely. I just wanted to feel like someone cared about me again. He put his arm around my shoulders. I care about you. Mom cares about you. You're not alone. But I felt alone. I felt foolish and old and used. I'd let a stranger into my home, into my bed, into my life, because I was desperate for connection. And she'd played me like a fiddle. Tyler must have sensed what I was thinking. Don't do that, he said quietly. Don't blame yourself for wanting to be happy. Blame her for being a predator. 3 days later, Diane was arrested in Flagstaff, trying to board a bus to Utah under the name Diana Richardson. She had identification documents for 3 different identities in her purse, along with research she'd been doing on another recent widower in Salt Lake City. A laptop in her car contained spreadsheets tracking her various marks, including me, with notes on our assets, vulnerabilities, and timelines for extraction. The detective called to tell me she's being extradited to New Mexico first for the active warrant, but Arizona will file charges too for identity fraud and attempted theft. The recording you made is solid evidence, and we're reopening the investigation into Harold Newsom's death in Nevada. Do you think she killed him? I can't comment on an ongoing investigation, but I will say that we're taking it very seriously. A month later, I was sitting in that same recliner where I'd received Tyler's warning text, reading the Arizona Republic again. But this time, the article I was reading was about Diane Kovac's arrest and the discovery that she'd scammed at least 11 men in 6 states over the past decade, stealing an estimated total of over $900,000. Harold Newsom's body had been exhumed. Preliminary tests showed elevated levels of digitalis, a medication that can cause heart failure if given in the wrong dose. Diane had worked as a pharmacy technician in the early 2000s. Murder charges were pending. I should have felt vindicated. Instead, I mostly felt sad. Sad for the life Margaret and I had planned that would never happen. Sad for the loneliness that had made me vulnerable. Sad for all the other men who'd been hurt or killed by this woman. Tyler came over that Sunday with Whataburger, like always. But this time, he brought a girl with him, a pretty young woman named Sarah, who worked at his tech company. "This is my girlfriend," he said, a little shy. "I wanted you to meet her." We ate burgers and watched football, and Sarah told me about growing up in Tucson, and Tyler looked at her the way I used to look at Margaret, the way I thought I'd been looking at Diane, but had really just been looking at a carefully constructed lie. After they left, I sat on my back patio as the sun set, thinking about everything that had happened. I thought about how close I'd come to losing everything. How if Tyler hadn't been paying attention, if he hadn't cared enough to dig deeper, I might be dead now, or broke, or both. I thought about trust and how hard it is to give after you've been burned. I thought about how we're never too old to be fooled, never too smart to fall for a con, never too careful to need people watching our backs. And I thought about Tyler, barely 22 years old, who'd loved me enough to question what I wanted to believe, who'd been brave enough to tell me a truth I didn't want to hear. I pulled out my phone and texted him, "Thank you for saving my life." His response came back almost immediately. "That's what family does. Love you, Grandpa." I sat there in the cooling desert evening, looking at those words on my screen, and I realized something. I wasn't alone. I never had been. I'd been so focused on the absence of Margaret that I'd failed to see all the people who were still there, still caring, still watching out for me. Loneliness is a terrible thing. It makes us vulnerable in ways we don't expect. It makes us willing to believe what we want to believe, to ignore warning signs, to trust too quickly and too completely. But isolation is a choice, and I'd been choosing it without realizing it, pushing away the family I had because they couldn't be the family I'd lost. That stops now. I'm 63 years old. I've got, God willing, another 20 or 30 years ahead of me. I'm not going to spend them alone in this house, talking to photographs and waiting to die. But I'm also not going to spend them desperately searching for someone to fill the void Margaret left, because that void can't be filled, not by another person. Anyway, I've started volunteering at the Humane Society, walking dogs twice a week. I've joined a book club at my local library. I'm teaching a financial literacy class at the community college, helping other seniors avoid the kind of scam I almost fell for. Emily and her family are coming to visit next month, and we're going to drive up to that ranch property in Prescott, the one I almost sold, and finally talk about what we want to do with it. Maybe build that cabin after all, a place for the grandkids to visit. And Tyler still comes over every Sunday with Whataburger. Sometimes Sarah comes with him now. They sit on my couch and talk about their lives, their dreams, their futures. And I listen, and I'm grateful, and I'm here. Last week, Tyler showed me how to set up privacy settings on my phone and computer. He made me promise never to join a dating site without running it by him first, and to always tell him if someone I'm dating starts asking about my finances. "I'm not trying to control your life, Grandpa," he said. "I just want to make sure nobody takes advantage of you again." "I know, kiddo, and I appreciate it. I really do." He'd smiled then, that familiar Tyler smile. "Besides, if you're going to date again someday, we need to find you someone who actually appreciates those terrible dad jokes you tell." "They're grandpa jokes now," I corrected him. "And they're not terrible. They're classic. The truth is, I might date again someday. Or I might not. Either way is okay. What matters is that I'm choosing it consciously, not out of desperation or loneliness, but because I genuinely want to share my life with someone. And if I do, you can bet Tyler will run a background check first. I'm telling you this story because I want you to understand something. It doesn't matter how smart you are, how careful you are, how much life experience you have. We're all vulnerable to people who know how to exploit loneliness, grief, and the basic human need for connection. The con artists are good at what they do. They study us, they learn our vulnerabilities, they tell us exactly what we want to hear. Diane knew I was grieving. She knew I felt guilty about moving on from Margaret. She knew I was lonely and scared of dying alone. And she used all of that against me with surgical precision. But here's what she didn't count on. Family. Real family. The kind that asks uncomfortable questions and refuses to let you make terrible decisions just to be polite. The kind that loves you enough to risk making you angry by telling you the truth. Tyler could have stayed quiet. He could have figured it wasn't his business, that I was an adult who could make my own choices. He could have worried about offending me or damaging our relationship by questioning my judgment. Instead, he did the hard thing. He gathered evidence, he made a plan, and he told me what I needed to hear, even though he knew I wouldn't want to hear it. And in doing so, he saved my life, my future, and probably my soul. So if you're reading this, or listening to this, and you're in a position where someone you love is involved with someone who doesn't feel right, I'm begging you, speak up. Do the research, ask the questions, risk the awkward conversation, because the alternative might be attending their funeral or watching them lose everything they've worked for their whole lives. And if you're someone who's alone, who's grieving, who's looking for connection in this often cruel world, please be careful. There are good people out there, genuine people who want real relationships. But there are also predators who see your vulnerability as an opportunity. Take it slow. Let people prove themselves over time. And most importantly, listen to the people who love you. Your kids, your grandkids, your friends. They see things you can't see when you're caught up in new romance or desperate for companionship. Diane is in prison now, awaiting trial on multiple charges across multiple states. Harold Newsom's family is finally getting answers. The other men she scammed are getting some form of justice, even if they'll never get their money back. Me? I'm okay. Better than okay, actually. I've got my family, my health, my home, my future. I've got Sunday lunches with Tyler and Sarah. I've got dogs to walk and books to read and a ranch to figure out what to do with. And I've got Margaret's memory, which doesn't need to be replaced or competed with or overshadowed. She was my wife, my partner, my best friend for 4 decades, and she always will be. But she's also gone, and I'm still here, and that means I get to figure out what the rest of my story looks like. It won't look like what I planned with her, but it can still be good. It can still have meaning, purpose, joy. Just not with Diane Kovacs or anyone like her. I hope you never need this advice. I hope you never find yourself in a situation where someone you trust is lying to you, using you, planning to destroy you. But if you do, I hope you have a Tyler in your life. Someone who pays attention, who cares enough to dig deeper, who's brave enough to tell you the truth. And if you are someone's Tyler, if you've noticed something wrong with someone your loved one is dating, please don't stay silent. It might be nothing, but it might be everything. Trust your instincts. Listen to the people who love you. And remember that real love, real connection, never asks you to ignore red flags or silence the people who care about you. That's the lesson I learned, sitting in my living room at 63 years old, reading a text message from my grandson that changed everything. 9 words. Grandpa, don't sign anything. I found something bad. 9 words that saved my life.